Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for May 6, 2014. And remind everybody that we're being recorded. And we'll just start with a moment of to remember the servicemen in Afghanistan. Thank you. And I apologize to everybody. I was late getting here from my office, and I apologize for holding everybody up. Our first action item is the Memorial Day Committee invites the selectmen to participate and march in the Memorial Day Parade and exercises on Monday, May 26, 2014. The committee respectfully requests the parade permit and a discharge of firearms permit for the event.
So move that the town issue a parade permit and the ability to discharge firearms for Memorial Day by the American Legion? Or is it the Memorial Day Committee?
Probably the committee, yeah.
Memorial Day Committee.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Secondly, Fire Chief Kingsbury reports that there are a number of outstanding ambulance invoices from April 7, 2004, so 10 years ago, to June 2nd, 2011, 3 years ago. Chief Kingsbury is seeking permission from the selectmen to allow Comstar, the town's billing agent, to write off these delinquent accounts.
Any background on why that would?
Yes, they do a pretty good job on collecting delinquent accounts, but there's some, for example, a person has died, or they were not the owner of the property, and you can't put a lien on the property because they didn't own property. It could be that they moved away, and we have no way of getting it. So it does help our books when the auditors come, and you to have a small amount of uncollectibles. So, and these are accounts that they're just not going to collect, no matter, they've tried for years and they just can't collect them. So
What is the amount in that, do we know?
yeah, is there a list in there with it?
Yes, there is a list.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a total on it. There's a list from the chief.
From the chief, yeah.
Mhm.
If you want, hold off and we can add it up and.
That's it.
No, but there's just no way you're going to be able to collect on
No,
this.
no.
I mean, you can turn, there are people that do collections on contingent fees, so it wouldn't cost you anything to turn them over to a collection agency, or,
Well,
don't know whether
in
that-
effect, our billing agency sort of is a collection agency because, that's
Mm.
how they get paid. So they're going to be after
oh,
anything they can, so.
so these are the ones that just aren't going to get collected, apparently, then.
Yeah, and if we could put them as a lien on the property, that would be one thing, because then it's easy to collect, because it becomes, it takes priority to payment of your real estate taxes. But if they're not, they don't own property, or they're dead, or they moved away.
All right, based on that, Mr. Chairman, I move that we allow Comstar, the town's billing agent, to write off these delinquent accounts.
Second, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Selectmen are invited to attend an Eagle Scout Court of Honor for William T. Darien on Sunday, June 1, 2014, 2 o'clock at the United Church of Christ.
Is that graduation for the high school? Is it June 1?
Don't know.
It's the following week. Oh, good.
We're asked to vote to approve health insurance renewal rates for the period from July 1 coming up to June 30 at the end of the fiscal year in 2015.
What's that, Mike?
These are the HMO and PPO plans. The Insurance Advisory Committee met a couple of weeks ago and discussed whether they should stick with the existing plan, which was the 8.8% increase in rates starting July 1st, or go with an alternative plan that would have been a 4.4% increase. In the various employee groups and the committee recommended unanimously that we stick with the current plan. So it would be an 8.8% increase, staying with the current carrier, Blue Cross Blue Shield, MIIA. The other plans we have are Medicare, what they call Medicare wrap plans. They cover what Medicare doesn't cover, but they tie in with the Medicare enrollment date, which is January 1st, so they don't come up for another 6 months. But these are our two active plans, the HMO and the PPO. Yes.
And that was a unanimous decision by the committee?
Yes, yeah, including all of the unions that are represented on it, and we also have a retiree representative, and Peter Moran is also on it, so.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the health insurance renewal rates for the period of 7/1/14 to 6/30/15.
I will second that. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Discuss proposed calendar for the Board of Selectmen from July 1 to December 31, 2014. And Mike has circulated a draft of that. Thank you, Mike, for doing that.
Oh, sure, well, sorry it took so long to get it done, but it was, seemed like everything else took priority, so the town meeting and the
Oh,
hospital. and
absolutely, yeah.
everything.
I thought it was a good idea, now that we're beyond town meeting, to try to
Yeah.
sit down and work out some of these housekeeping things like this for the,
Well, I remember the
for what
last
we're
one
gonna
I
be
did, I
doing.
did it for 6 months, and it's tough to go really beyond that. Even this
Yep.
is tough because you've got to, like, if you look at the August 5th date, we've got about 7 groups coming in, and whether they'll be able to make it or not, or whether that'll have to be rescheduled is, it's tough to go out that far. People haven't made their summer plans yet, so. So it is a flexible calendar, and any changes you people want to make, I think would be certainly advisable. There may be some groups I've left off there that you'd want to meet with.
Mr. Chairman, you also had mentioned some things over May and June as well.
yes, I think that we should fill in. Mike started on July 1. I think that
Right.
we need to plan our May and June calendar as well.
Yeah, I think the big thing you've got is to appoint the hospital committee, redevelopment committee.
And I talked to Steve Nolan today in the State Hospital Advisory Committee. He's going to plan on coming in on May 27th.
Okay.
Bring the committee to have a discussion. So he's gonna poll them to ensure they can all come, but that was the date that worked for him.
And Evelyn was putting together a list of people that have expressed an interest in serving on the committee. Is still anybody that does want to serve, please get a letter in and with a resume so that they.
Do they have to, I had two that approached me. Is it David Perini? Is
Yes,
it David
David
Sears?
Perini,
And
yeah.
Pat Casey.
Okay.
That both expressed interest on that.
Yeah, they should at some point get a resume in so that you can review them in terms of what they bring to the table. So it doesn't have to be an extensive one, but just,
Pat Casey sent a sort of a little synopsis in an email that I think I forwarded to you guys. That-
okay, I'll check,
I didn't get that.
I'll check it, and maybe I have it.
No, I'm not on your mailing, on your email list.
Pardon?
I'm not on your email list.
Oh, sometimes you are.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I had 5 just areas. I mean, some of it
Sure, go ahead.
what was a repeat of what Mike had. One, we had 2 discussions with some of the members of the Cemetery Commission that I don't think we quite got to, and I think when we had that discussion, we were in the middle of town meeting, I think we said we
Right.
need to hold off on that. Because one question I had is just the whole issue of, do we need additional space at the cemetery, and does that mean we're gonna have to purchase land, or is that something perhaps might be up at the hospital, or, I just think we need some discussion, and the former Commissioner Rob Gregg raised a number of issues, so I think at some point it might be worth our while to bring the entire Cemetery Commission and probably Ken in and see what we can
I
do.
agree.
with
Absolutely.
that.
That's actually on my list that I made up as well. Okay.
Okay, and I think you had mentioned this
Although,
may.
can I just,
Sure.
before we go on from the
Yeah.
Cemetery Commission, I would also like to address the issue of the proper role of the Cemetery Commission, because there seemed to be quite a disagreement between Mr. Gregg and Mr. Feeney as to what the proper role was.
And to follow that, I think at that same meeting, you would raise the issue of, it might be nice to have, I think you called it a DPW 101 session of how the DPW works, especially with Chapter 90 funds. And then we mentioned some things like, the East Main Street sidewalk project, the North Street project, and any other future projects maybe that are coming up and how that works. So that might be good to have Ken in on just,
Yep, I
maybe
agree.
just the
That's
issue of
on my list as
DPW.
well. Yep.
Yeah, I did have that on September 30th. I've got, the same night, water and sewer, I've scheduled water and sewer to come in, discuss the tank. I have him coming down and discuss the road and sidewalk maintenance and construction program, which,
Okay. Well, why don't we hold that one for a second then, and we'll figure out what to do with that. Why don't you go on with your list?
Okay, I also had the Economic Development Committee, which I think Mike has, and maybe just, I'd like to see an emphasis put on marketing Medfield, especially the restaurants and others, to be bringing people into the town as well. But I think, Mike, you had them at some point.
yeah, September 2nd.
Okay, so, and maybe we can broaden that more than just Lot 3.
Okay.
With the economic development. And then I'd like to have, now that we're a tree city, the tree warden come in, because there's new regulations, now that we're a tree city. For example, it says if you cut a tree down, you're supposed to replace a tree. And just to make sure the tree warden is on board with these new regulations, now that we're a tree city. So maybe
This is a state regulation?
it's a regulation by being a tree city.
Oh, by being a tree city. Huh?
Yeah. So maybe in May or June, we could bring the tree warden in and have everybody on the same page so we know what the regulations are by being a tree
Yes.
city.
Yep, absolutely. Actually, it'd be good to get some sort of update from him on the trees in the downtown area, because we learned that these ones in front of Lord's were not the proper trees to be there. And I think that we have that same issue over on North Street with some of them that are not the proper trees. So it'd be good to get, I've often thought it would be a good thing to have an inventory of the street trees. It strikes me that it would be a perfect project for a high school student for the summer.
The aesthetics committee actually did that.
Oh, they did?
We
Good.
had a Eagle Scout
Excellent.
candidate that actually worked, and he worked with Mike Leaders, and we actually have that inventory, and we have a map on that.
Oh, good.
And that was by
Excellent.
the aesthetics committee.
Is that just the cemetery, or is that for the?
No, it was the whole town, downtown, the
Just
downtown area.
I don't think you want to start counting trees in Noon Hill.
No. And the last one, Mike sort of touched upon with the Downtown Study Committee, the Aesthetics Committee. And I know you had raised the issue before of what exactly is the job of the Aesthetics/Sidewalk Committee. And that came about, they were actually appointed by the Planning Board. And part of their job was to try to give a master plan of what the sidewalk should be, the tree planting should be, so it's not, here comes Starbucks and they're gonna do this to the sidewalk, and here comes Roach Brothers and they're gonna do that. That would have a master plan that would, when any new business or any new construction takes place in the downtown area, they can at least say, well, here's the plan we have, here's the type of sidewalk. For example, on the sidewalk, what the aesthetics committee voted, and what's going to be put in place in front of the new Brothers Marketplace will be a 2-foot area of brick, very similar to what the DPW did on Pound Street, and then would be the cement area. So that would be the new area. They're also looking at, for example, and the chief of police is on the committee as well, what to do with the crosswalks. For example, the chief is looking at some type of a brick-looking, maybe not brick, but a brick-looking type of a crosswalk, something that would stand out of a different material. He actually wants to experiment perhaps on the crosswalk that goes from the First Parish Church over to Zebras as one of the first. So that's what the Aesthetic Committee is working on. But we do have the Downtown Study Committee, we do have the Aesthetics Sidewalk Committee, we have the Cultural District Committee, and we have the Historic District Committee, all dealing with issues of the downtown. The Aesthetics Committee, because they're under the Planning Board, are looking down the road that perhaps they would become, and they need more discussion, sort of a review design committee
Or design
that
review,
would
good.
advise the Planning Board. It wouldn't be mandatory, but anybody, before they went to the Planning Board, would go to the the review design committee and see what it is that they're looking for, and that would give weight when they went to the planning board, that they were following what the review design committee wanted to do. So that whole thing, maybe we need to have the downtown study committee take over a lot of these duties,
The
rather than
downtown-
have 5 or 6 little subcommittees.
I think it makes sense to reinvigorate the Downtown Study Committee and charge them with the, sort of the overarching planning and focus on the downtown.
So those were the 5 I had for
Okay.
maybe May and June.
Let me go back to your second one, which was the DPW and the roads 101. I think that that's something that we really need to do, there's just, the Chapter 90 stuff is so complicated. I'd like to have like a primer on that, and also, because I think that we can save money for the town if we're sure that the roads are being, if the maintenance work is being done in a certain way, and I just want to check and find out from the superintendent and the DPW that we're doing the things that we should be doing, so that we're getting the most for our money out of our highway spending. So my thought on the DPW is a little different, maybe a little broader than what you were talking about, but I think that's a good thing to be taken up. In addition, in that area, I think that it's become clear to me that the Water and Sewer Board, that we should really focus on what their role is as well. Up until this year, the warrant committee thought the Water and Sewer Board was reviewing the budgets, and they haven't been. And so that, I think that we need to have a discussion as to whether or not they should be, and just whether or not they're just going to be off at the side, or whether they're going to have more of an oversight function, which is what makes sense to me. But I think that we should have that discussion on a policy level and make a decision.
Mike has water and sewer on the 30th. Maybe if that replaces it, and the discussion by the DPW, maybe we can do in May and June and tie that all in with Ken.
Sure.
We can maybe just
I
subdivide.
know the water and sewer and the cemetery issues were things that I put off until after the town meeting in my
Right.
mind, because I didn't, because we were busy. Everybody was busy.
But maybe if we did cemetery and DPW sometime in May and June, and then on the 30th, just have that all water and sewer, and move the DPW up to May or June.
Sure.
So the 30th would be Water and Sewer Board to discuss water tower construction program and also the role of the Water and Sewer Board. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know if you want to put it off until the end of September is the only thing. I mean, if in fact their role is going to become more strategic and more important.
Well, the reason I put it in September was because the water tower design is supposed to be complete, ready to go out to bid in July.
Mhm.
So I figure that's about the time that they probably would be ready to come in with a recommendation for an award. But, that's the only reason I put it September 3rd. If you wanted to move it up earlier, that's certainly feasible. That's why this is a draft. So.
Would you have a suggestion to move that to a different date?
I was thinking of moving it, having it done sooner, just because in my mind, I had the water and the sewer and the cemetery commission coming after town meeting. But let me mention some of the other things that I was thinking about, Richard. I think that we as a board of selectmen need to have our discussion of our goals as soon as possible. And so I think that could be a May and June thing. And I think that Mike should be setting up his goals for the coming year in the May-June framework as well. One of the things that we haven't been very good about doing is the evaluation of the town administrator. I don't know that we even did that last year or the year before. And so that we probably should do that in the May-June timeframe, I think.
Yeah, I had that down for July 15th, but, reviewing your goals, but we can move it back to June if you'd like.
The other thing I'd like to do when we do our goals is review how we did with last year's goals.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and that should be part of our evaluation of Mike's work as to how what he did corresponded with what the goals were.
And ours as well, how we did as well, right?
Yeah. Although, well, the way that you said that, let me ask, because I assume that when the Board of Selectmen creates a series of goals, that those are the goals, our expectations for the town administrator as well, and things that we want the town administrator to be working on.
Well, you had a consolidated set of goals, and then I came up with 3 or 4 goals based on that, so it was carrying out your
Our
goals. I think
goals.
that's what
Okay,
you
all right,
voted to
yeah,
do.
yeah.
So we
Okay.
can dig those out, Evelyn, and get them copies, so.
And the Personnel Board had some methodology for doing the review that we should get copies of and circulate those. And so those are the things that I would try to plug in the May and June. And I don't much care how things are ordered.
Okay.
Other than that, I think that it makes sense to do the goals as soon as possible and not put those off.
So it sounds like then, if we did goals, cemetery, DPW, and Tree City. I think the economic, Mike has covered, and the whole issue of the downtown studies and others, I think he has as well.
On the August 5th is a downtown.
Yeah. So that maybe the cemetery, DPW, goals, and Tree City, those 4? We do those in May and June?
Gold Cemetery, DPW, and Tree City, yeah, that's what I have. Okay, I've got
Great.
that, yeah. We'll switch those, okay.
Goals, cemetery, DPW, and what was your fourth, Richard?
Tree.
Tree City.
Tree. I would do along with the cemetery and the DPW, I would do the water and sewer, because the issues with the cemetery and the water and sewer board seem to be very similar to me in terms of the fact that, do we want these commissions that are functioning with respect to the DPW to have any real say or control, or do we want them to just, like the cemetery commission met once in 3 years, so it clearly is not very active.
It may be, they may feel a little bit reluctant to come in that early because of the water tower design. That's the only thing I'm thinking of, because they're right in the middle of it right now. They're trying to get a design, and I think they'd rather come in when they have the design complete. You may not want to wait till September, but I don't think you want to have, if it goes out to bid in July, I think you probably won't want to have them in before July, because I think they'd feel more comfortable coming in with
Mhm.
that to show
The
you.
water tower, okay.
I would suggest that you have town council be present to brief you as well, because
Oh,
some
sure.
of these committees, such as water and sewer, have statutory
Right,
regulations, and you cannot, as a board, institute regulations beyond that without a charter change, because they're also listed, their roles in the charter, so I would recommend you be there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we should get information in advance,
Mhm.
so that we can take a look and see what's possible and what's not. Maybe we could ask Mark to give us a memo on that as to what we can
That's a
do
good
and
idea.
can't do,
Yeah.
both with regard to water and sewer and the
Yeah.
cemetery commission.
The other thing I think probably ought to be on every one of these, and that's why I didn't single it out too much, is the hospital, because it's gonna be an ongoing, and it's, you got the master plan discussion for the hospital, but once you get your committee going, you have your mission statement, and you might wanna start thinking about what you wanna do for mission statement for that committee. It's not too soon to start putting your ideas together, as to what you would hope to accomplish, because as soon as you appoint them, I assume the first thing they want to know is what do you expect us to do? And then I think they'll probably anticipate that you want to meet with them on a regular basis throughout the course of the year, because it's, they've got the whole thing of master plan. Town council this morning, I didn't put it on the agenda because you just brought it in, but he had a meeting this week on, review, his bylaw review, and he had some comments for you, so I gave it to Evelyn to put on next meeting's agenda, so. And the other thing is, in terms of the state hospital, is how you want to transition to this new committee. You know, you have two committees right now, Shirk and Shrek. And I assume Shrek would have an ongoing cleanup that's probably gonna go on for a number of years, and you wanna have some sort of a structure there to monitor that on an ongoing basis. The hospital, Shrek probably will be, it depends on how the new committee's structured. You know, you may have some representation from the existing committee that will fold into the new committee, or it may be totally separate, depending on how you choose to structure it. So whether that will continue as an ongoing committee or be folded into the new committee, or something
I
you
mean,
need
off
to
the top of
think
my
about.
head, the environmental issues that State Hospital Environmental Review Committee was looking at, the SHREC, that those environmental review issues are gonna be ongoing as long as the cleanup's ongoing, so that committee may wanna, we may just want them to
Exactly, you know,
continue
I would
functioning.
anticipate that would have a continuing role, because it is a separate, somewhat separate.
Although they
function.
have, I mean, they haven't been meeting, because I know that Deb's on that committee and she hasn't gone to a meeting for a long, long time.
Well, I think probably because it was the negotiating committee was doing a lot
Yep.
of the work.
Yep.
And now that's another committee you have that can deal with the hospital too, so I think you really need to do some thinking about how you wanna move forward with a committee structure on this, because you don't wanna have it so confusing that nobody understands what their role is. On the other hand, I think the environment is a separate role from the redevelopment process and the master
Yeah,
planning
but you want to make sure that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, and we don't, so that there's close communication, either a liaison between it or real close communication to keeping up to date with that.
Yeah.
They're not two separate committees that are, you know, ships in the night and that don't communicate with each other. I would imagine the review committee has done their job, and on May 27th would officially be disbanded, so to speak.
Well, you could, or I mean, you could, you know, another alternative is to have that committee go on and do the planning for the reuse. I mean,
You
there are
mean-
a lot of different ways of dealing with
Well,
what we're gonna be doing, so we just need to
we're
figure
gonna-
out what we want.
We're going to have to, I would think, and that's part of my question, the timeline of that, I would think, following what Christine had recommended before, sometime between now and the summer, actually have the committee appointed, and then come September, when people come back, they're ready to go. I like that idea.
Well, my preference would be that they not take the summer off, that they just start meeting. I mean, maybe you're not gonna have 100% attendance, but I think that it makes sense to have them start working. Yes, Mr. Massaro.
Could you get a mic there, Bill?
I think a lot of this is contingent upon the legislation passing by July 30th as well.
Yes.
Without the microphone, if I might make a suggestion, there are two committees or subcommittees that will still need to be active, assuming again, first that the legislation passes, we still have the negotiation committee and to work on the purchase and sale.
Which isn't actually a subcommittee of anything.
That's a
No,
separate committee.
But and within the mediation committee, we have requirements for monthly meetings through the balance of the cleanup activity. And as part of that group, there are subcommittees involved with the river and also with the construction of the, the new bank.
Yeah, so the mediation committee will keep on meeting
So that will
through
keep
the-
on meeting. And Shirk has taken something of a backseat to that, but in general, as the mediation committee, for example, the settlement agreement and the plans for that were presented to Shirk. And Shirk approved the settlement agreement. And also, we will have some PIP procedures that will still be going. We have the power plant area, the phase 4, the final phase 4, and cleanups, and we'll have several reports there that will have to be reviewed. And I'm assuming that Shirk will take its normal position in reviewing things under the public information process, so. That's it.
The other
Thank
thing
you.
I think you gotta figure in this whole context is, how do you keep the public informed and allow for public participation in the whole process too? So And I don't know whether you do that through this committee or, because you know, if you want to keep this committee relatively small and you want to have people that bring something to the table in terms of their background, what they can contribute to the development process. So I think you need to think about how you're going to provide an input for public participation and public information.
I agree. I think probably that should be part of the mission statement in a sense, to make sure that the public is getting ample opportunity to express their opinion, much like that vision session that took place. And there'd be some avenue of communication on an ongoing basis so that the general town population knows, what's going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it probably should be more than just agendas and minutes. It probably should be some sort of written report that gets pushed out to the town on a monthly or quarterly basis. How, we funded the master planning for the state hospital, did we, at town meeting?
Mhm.
How much,
Yeah.
was that the 175,000 for
Well,
consultants?
Some of
For
that
the-
is
yeah,
for the
it's-
cleanup monitoring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
How much are we figuring is going to be for the master planning versus cleanup?
Preliminary estimates probably between 100 and 125,000 for the master plan.
Okay. And how about master planning for the whole town? Because I think that we really need to get going on that. I know that Sarah asked for 25,000 from capital budget, and that got turned down. I guess she told me she was going to ask for 25,000 a year, for 5 years to get 125 to do a master plan for the whole town.
We actually didn't turn it down. It never fully went to capital budget. There was a discussion at the selectmen, so I held it because I was under the assumption that next year we were going for the whole amount of money, that we didn't want to wait the 5 years.
That's certainly
But
my
the-
choice.
But the key
Yeah.
part was getting the state hospital done first, and then
Yeah.
it was my assumption we were
Okay,
doing
all right.
that one
Is
next.
is there
so-
some way to try to accelerate the part of the master planning for the whole town? To somehow, I don't do planning, so and so I'm just wondering if there's some way to use the fact that we're planning for the hospital to somehow get some benefit for the master plan for the whole town out of that.
So- Some of the information that's gonna be compiled for the state hospital will be used for the overall master plan. Obviously,
Okay.
your background information or any of the demographics information will be coming from that.
Yeah, yeah. All right, but we're not going to focus on other parts of the town other than the state hospital for the,
Well, then I think you have the water and sewer master plans that are being updated, and the schools, I think, have had a long-range plan looking at their facilities and programs. So, I mean, those, you can start assembling those sort of things into a master plan. Those are components of it.
I had a memory that we had asked department heads to give us like 3 to 5 year projections, just short little snippets, but planning 3 to 5 years out of what's going to happen, and we haven't seen any of those. I mean, I would think that maybe those would be the sorts of things that we could start rolling into the master plan, Chris?
It depends on exactly what kind of master plan you wanna do, and I think that's what needs to be clarified. Are you
Okay,
doing
we
a
need some-
land use master plan, or are you doing an overall needs assessment for the town? There's different kinds of planning, and honestly, I think every time we talk about it, we talk about a different aspect of it, so it may be a good
We
idea
probably
for
need
us
some
to.
Education on how to master plan
Yeah, I
then.
think we need to specifically look at what's counted as a master plan, and we can look at that.
I mean, my reaction would be that we can't plan for land without planning, knowing what our needs are, so that we
Correct.
have to know what our
Yep.
needs are to know what the land's going to be used for.
I think the department heads took the request for the 3 to 5 years as their capital budget, and they all handed in their 3 to 5 year
Oh.
assessment for capital budget, so I think that was their response to
Oh,
that.
okay, all right.
But if you're looking for, more of a different write-up of what they like to see for the department over the next 3 to 5 years, we can have them do that.
Yeah, I would think that, well, that was the sort of thing that I was thinking of, sort of, what are your goals or aspirations, or how are things going to change, or do you see your market changing, the needs changing of what you're doing? But maybe, and maybe if we could put together all of those 3 to 5 year capital budgets and give those to the selectmen to take a look at, because that might be useful for us.
I gave them, you should have them.
Oh, was that just that big spreadsheet?
Yeah, it's a spreadsheet
All
what
right,
they
so
want.
that's a
Yep.
couple pages, yeah.
Yep.
All right, so it's all on that one spreadsheet, all right.
Yeah, it's just, I just gave you a summary. I didn't think you'd want the quotations or any of that information, but.
That's a bigger issue than where are we putting, between the hospital and the master plan, where are we factoring that in here?
Well, the SHAC committee's coming in on May 27, so why don't we try to address where we're headed with the hospital on May 27?
Okay. What is our plan as far as actually having a committee appointed? What I would like to ask, and I'm still not 100% clear, I would like to talk with when the committee comes in on May 27th, what are the exact skills, what are the exact qualifications, goals that we want this committee to do before we actually appoint people to it? Who do we want on this committee based on, are they all developers, are they financial people, are they marketing people? What are the types of skills we need to bring in? I'd like someone either that's already gone through this process to give us a little, another primer 101 just on setting up a committee like this, because this is probably the most important thing Medfield's going to do in our lifetime, of what's going to happen up there, to make sure we have the exact and the correct skills of who's on this committee.
I smiled when you said that because Chris and I went to the legislative hearing on the Medfield State Hospital purchase legislation, and the committee chair told us that he wrote the reuse plan for Northampton State Hospital. And so that's the sort of person that would be perfect to pick his brain and find
Right,
out what was
right.
useful for them to know.
And I think the SHAC committee had started to do that. I know that they had gone out to Northampton to meet with the committee and the people who had done that, so I think there is some ground.
Gil did a
Any
lot of
idea
that.
of who's on, who serves on the committees?
You might want to get a list from Gil Rogers. He went out and talked to a lot of the people in almost every town where they did a hospital
Yeah,
replan. He talked to
yeah.
committees there, so he may be able to give you some
Yeah.
contact names there.
Yeah, and Ross Smythe went with him on a lot of those, I
Yes.
know.
Yes.
And honestly, he talked to a lot of them, so it's probably a good idea to talk to him, get that information, and not quiz these people again. I don't want to
Right.
go to the well so many times on all our resources, but I know that Roz and Gil spent a lot of time at Northampton and Danvers and several others, so I think it's the most important to have them in. And when I talked to Shaq about coming in on the 27th, the concept was to tell you what, kind of wrap up where they were, what their continuing role would be, and then talk about, next steps for the next committee. And I think there's several people on that existing committee who are going to, have verbally asked about the committee, if not issued
Yeah.
a statement of interest, so.
So I think that's the first step for the Medfield State Hospital, is that May 27 at this point then.
Okay.
And then maybe we'll come up with some decisions that night as to what direction we're going to go in after that.
And anything you could do, I think, to kind of jot down your own ideas of what you would like to see and see if they jive with what the committee is looking for too. I think it would be helpful to you people in asking the right questions of them, so to speak.
Okay. So then we've got maybe 4 meetings in May and June where we don't have anything scheduled, so that, can we agree that we're going to work on our goals and the town administrator's goals? Do we want to do the cemetery commission then, or do we want to wait until we get a
Well,
memo
why
from?
don't you, if you want to, you're really talking two different things, I think. You're talking about the role, if I understand you correctly.
Correct,
The role of the cemetery and the role of the
Cemetery
water and
commission.
sewer,
yeah,
not necessarily issues dealing with the water tower construction.
correct.
And Mike, you're just concerned that they're up to their necks working on all this and it's too busy right now?
Well, it's not so much that, it's that they're probably gonna feel a little uncomfortable coming in when they don't have answers to the big project that's coming up, what the time frame for completion, start of construction, what the bid prices are.
Well, but we're really asking them about a very different issue, and so that, they can come back and wherever you schedule them here,
September 30th.
September 30, to talk about the water tower. That would certainly be fine. I don't know whether it's too much of an imposition to ask them to come twice, but then again, that's sort of almost 6 months apart, 5 months apart, if they
Yeah.
came in May and
So you're looking for the Cemetery Commission, the Water Sewer Commission to come in to talk about with Ken the role of those two commissions with Ken and how they function, and I think Christine's point was some of this may
Some
be
legal
dictated
issues,
by,
yeah.
you know,
I can
by,
ask Mark to give you a memo before, or in the meantime, until we schedule that meeting, give you a memo as to what the statutory role is, and
Yeah.
then what the Board of Selectmen can or cannot pass on to them to do.
Yeah.
so maybe you could hold that off till maybe the end of June.
Sure.
Maybe that'd be the last one.
Yeah.
Combine cemetery and water and sewer together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have goals, and then you have cemetery, water and sewer. The DPW 101,
101.
Is the third.
okay.
plus the issues of like the East Main Street sidewalks, North Street, those projects as well. We'll all be in that umbrella.
Sure, sure.
So the third would be DPW, and then the fourth is the Tree City.
Tree City, okay.
Well, actually, on the 27th of May, we're doing the hospital. I don't know if that's too many or not.
And then we've got the town administrator evaluation that we need to do in there as well.
Well, we have 3 meetings in May and June, right? And then we go this summer, we go to 2, is that correct?
No, we have you down for 2 for June, 2 for July.
Oh,
and
2 for
August.
July, no, okay,
2 for
so,
June. All right, so then we have 3 meetings because one meeting in May is going to be taken up with the hospital. Or is that an extra meeting in May? That's the third meeting in May.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 2 meetings one more meeting in May that we can schedule for, and 2 meetings in June. So we've got 3 meetings. Why don't we do the tree stuff along with the DPW, combine those?
combine the 2? Okay.
We'll do the cemetery and water and sewer at the end of June, we'll do the goals. Can we do the goals at our next meeting?
Sure.
When do we do the town administrator evaluation? Because that should take
I think he
some-
has that already
takes-
scheduled.
No,
What, July 15th, was it?
July 15th, he has it.
oh, all right, well, goals, all right, sure, we can do the evaluation at that time, too. I don't think we want to wait till July to do our goals, we're going to do those.
No, we're doing that, but as far as you wanted to do the
This-
town administrator's
We'll just make this the evaluation.
evaluation, and also the FY budget goals.
Sure, good idea to talk about those, yeah.
Okay, looks good.
All right, so maybe, Mike, if you could then do another revision of this and try to understand what we said.
I may be back to you.
Yeah. Next, we're asked to vote to sign a letter written to the trustees of the reservations regarding the trustees' decision to not meet with representatives of the Norfolk County Mosquito Control District for discussion regarding the trustees' policy not to use applications for mosquito control. And Mike has drafted a letter for our signature that got circulated this afternoon.
Right, you recall this winter when you met with Dave Lawson, you were gonna write a letter at the time to the trustees, and he suggested that you hold off until such time as the Norfolk County Mosquito Control Board had had a chance to review the matter with the trustees of reservations, and apparently they haven't had much success in doing that, so he thought maybe now would be an appropriate time for you to send the letter, so I
Good.
drafted the letter, feel free to make any changes.
No, I think you did a nice job
Yeah, I
on
thought
the
it was a
letter.
great letter, too, so I move that we send that letter.
I'll second that. I'm just very, very concerned that the trustees of reservation are not even up to meeting with Norfolk County Mosquito Control. I mean, we're talking issues of Triple E, and we're talking West Nile virus. We're talking some serious health issues, because there's particularly 2 large parcels of land in Medfield, one in the Rocky Woods area and one in the Noon Hill area, and you have a number of developments that are right around that, as well as the entire town. I'm just very concerned with that. Mike, I think you did a good job with the letter in expressing those concerns. Yeah, I just don't understand why they're not even willing to meet and discuss, because in listening to, was it David?
Dave, yeah.
From Norfolk County Mosquito Control, you know, the issues he had with the pellets and everything else, I think, was addressing some of the concerns that the trustees had, and if they're not even hearing these concerns, that's really bothering me.
Well, I was really concerned this morning. Barry Mandel came in, who's doing our beaver trapping, and he's been out there for several weeks now, and he said the water is extremely high. He said in the Juniper Road area, there's just one giant pond that several of the dams have backed up to the level of the dams beyond them and created just a great pond. So he said even when you do break up the dams, these beavers have built them sometimes 200 feet back into the swamps, and it's still going to trap water behind them even if you open up the dam where the rivers or streams are. And he said you're going to have a massive number of puddles that are going to be left over that are perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes. And if you haven't been able to go in and do larvicide applications, when the adults are born and start multiplying, it's going to be a hellacious summer. And yet they don't seem to have any concern about that, especially when, you know, we had cases not too far away of AAA. I guess AAA was a horse in Dover. But then there
Well,
was
we had
some-
one of the testing sites, there's no cases here in Medfield, but
They
one of
found
the
it, yeah.
testing sites, I believe in the Charles River here in Medfield, we had a case
yeah.
last year that was
Yeah.
picked up. Do we have any, if the trustees pay no attention to our letter, as they didn't pay much attention to Norfolk County mosquito control, is there any legal action or anything that our Board of Health, which the Board of Health has tremendous powers, is there anything legally that the town can do? I realize it's private property, but is there anything because of health reasons that our Board of Health could do?
I doubt it. I think that, you know, the Mass Department of Public Health might be, because they have the ability to order aerial spraying over vast regions if there's cases of, you know, reported. I think what I'd like to do in that letter is to send copies to the Millis Board of Selectmen, the Dover Board of
Yes.
Selectmen,
Yep.
Sherburne?
Sherburne, and, well, the towns they mentioned in the original letter were, where they were banning it, at Millis and Dover. So those particularly, but yeah, other areas of town. Because, you know, you're gonna start getting calls from people saying, you gotta do something about these mosquitoes. Well, you can't, if the trustees don't allow spraying on their land, where a lot of these breeding areas are, you can't do much about it. And people are just gonna have to understand that if you've got a major landowner that won't allow spraying on their land,
Right.
the consequences are not going to fall upon the town. They're going to fall upon the trustees for their actions. And, you know, maybe they have a sound basis for their decisions, but at least they ought to sit down with Norfolk County and they ought to explain to the residents of the towns that they're involved in why they're taking a position like that.
It would be sort of an essential courtesy at the least for them
Yeah.
to do so.
Is there anything our Board of Health holds over them, just to get in discussion with? Do we have the power to,
I don't-
maybe subpoena isn't the right word, but the power to bring in to the Board of Health meetings representatives because they are such large landowners?
I think it's the State Board of Health that have more. I'll check with town council, but I suspect it's going to be because there are landholders all over the state. It's not
Right.
just these towns.
Right.
They own thousands of acres,
Right.
tens of thousands of acres across the state. And I assume their policy is the same statewide.
I mean, we could certainly invite Mike Francis, who's the local TTTOR on-site resident at Rocky Woods. I mean, he lives here in town, so we could invite him to come to a selectmen's meeting.
But I
and talk to
suspect
us.
that's not where the decisions are being made. In
No, but
fact,
he could tell us about it, and he could carry information back.
I'm sorry, who is he?
Mike Francis is he lives up at Rocky Woods.
He's up there, okay.
Nice guy. I met him last month.
And is he in charge of the Noon Hill, all the property in Medfield, or just the Rocky Woods property?
I think he's probably in charge of all of it. He's the sort of
I
the
think probably,
local
yeah.
on-site person
Well,
for
he
the
might be good.
TTOR.
I think that's a good idea. Well, let's start, if we can't meet in the higher level, let's,
did he move to Dover, and Because isn't he in charge of Dover Medfield properties? I thought he
don't
was
know.
living over at
Oh, well, maybe.
Boyce
I-
Farm or one of those things.
When I met him, I mentioned to him that I had met one of his predecessors when I worked on the Trails Committee. One of the people from the TTOR, the resident in Medfield at that time, was on the Trails Committee with me. And he was saying that he
funny
took
how
his
it-
place, and so I just assumed that he lived here at Rocky Woods.
It's funny how invisible the trustees have become since the skating stopped.
Yeah.
You know, they just
I
really are.
talked to him about that, actually, and he, because I told him that would be one of the things that he could really do that would make people in Medfield very happy, and he was sort of interested in doing something about that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that was it might be good to have him in to, he was gonna, the skating was it was gonna be a lot different than it had been in the past, but he was interested in doing something with skating.
If there was a decision like that to be made, I think it has to be made again at the upper levels. He could bring it to them and try to get them to reconsider it, but what's their motto? A museum, the Massachusetts landscape, which sort of tells you a little bit about where they're coming from, but.
Well, I mean, and the concern I have, I mean, Medfield has one of the largest percent of young people in the state, under 18, and a lot of these kids are in summer camps, they're in sports, they're out, and that's what's concerning me, especially come fall when school starts up again.
Oh, yeah, yeah, there's soccer out in the late afternoons, and
And we saw in southeastern Massachusetts, a number of communities there that, where it seems more prevalent there, that's a real concern. I don't want that to happen up here in Medfield because we're not spraying large areas because of the trustee property.
can we take 2 action items on this then? How about one is to get in touch with the Board of Health and just ask them if there's anything that they feel that they want to do or can do? And secondly, why don't we invite Mike Francis to come in and talk to us?
I move that we contact the Board of Health to see what, if anything, they can do to assist us, and that we invite Mike Francis to come in to our next meeting?
All right.
I have his email if you need
What?
it.
Thank you.
I have his email.
Sure, if you'd share that, that'd be great.
Because they have been in with Charles River Watershed in the mediation process for the C&D area, so Mike Francis has been in several meetings. So.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And then we need to vote on the prior motion to send the letter to the trustees of the reservation.
I move that we send the letter that Mike authored to the trustees of reservation.
I'd already moved that. Second?
Okay,
All
don't
in
forget to
favor?
sign
Aye.
it before you leave tonight,
Yep.
too. Yeah.
Okay, then, update on beaver activity. I had a report that Barry Mandel found a 61-pound beaver in town.
Yes, one of our assessors helped them yank it out of the swamp, so, Frank Perry.
61 pounds?
Bigger than most
Yes.
dogs.
Well, as Barry Mandel describes it, there's the world's largest rodent. He has been breaking up dams and pulling out beavers, and the traps get flooded out, and he has to reset them. So he submitted his bills today. The total of what he's done today comes to about $4,700. And I think it's well earned when you see the number of, he said there are, just in the Stop River area, there's multiple dams. One area, there's 5 dams in one area. And
That's between
around
South Street and Causeway?
There's a lot around Juniper, and there's a lot around Causeway, and yeah.
Did he look, I've not seen the water by White Street ever that high. There has to be several in there. By
Yes.
White Street?
Yes,
think
he
there
said
are
that's
always-
another area that's a
always a lot
big
back in
problem.
there.
Yeah, yeah. He's been talking to the owner of the former Corona property and got permission to do whatever needs to be done in there.
Oh, good.
But it's, until the state helps out, it's gonna continue to get worse because these things keep breeding and they throw out their young after a couple of years, and the young gotta build new houses. It's sort of like subdivision for beavers, I guess. It keeps going on. And if you don't do something to control the growth, it's, you know, he tells me there's problems. He said Medway has got a real problem now. I heard a thing on the news a few weeks ago, Lowell is having problems with beavers. So maybe we'll get some action now. When the cities start having problems with beavers, they'll realize that it is a real issue. When it's affecting the towns, who cares? They're out there somewhere, you know.
But I think your point, Mike, is a good one, that it really has become such an ongoing problem that we have to approach it as a maintenance issue that we just have to deal with on an ongoing basis, and so that I think.
But it's sort of a maintenance issue that's like sticking your finger in the hole in the dam.
It's Sisyphusian, it is, I mean, because they just keep coming back, absolutely,
Yeah.
yep.
And until there's
But we can't really do anything else other than just keep,
for now,
Taken away,
your hands are tied, you know.
So are you looking for an extension for him to be able to continue? Is that something the Board of Health does?
You can only get one 30-day permit, you know. I'd like to, I think we need to be able to have him go out and breach the dams. But, you know, you can get 3 10-day permits for beyond the trapping season, which is over now, the trapping season, then you get one 30-day permit from the state.
So are
That's
we in the 30-day period right now?
Yes, yeah.
How many, when does that end?
I have the permit in there, I'll check. I'd say probably about another couple of weeks.
So in another couple of weeks, that ends, Barry cannot do any more work?
He can breach the dams, you know, remove the dams, I believe, but he can't trap.
So Justin, for whatever the time period is through the month of May, is the last period he'll be able to trap until the trapping season in the fall?
Yeah, that's my understanding, yeah.
And in the meantime, as they
Meantime.
build the dams, he can continue to go out and breach the dams?
Yeah, but they're pretty skillful at building them back. He said this is the time of year when they have their young. So I said, when do they throw their older young out? And he said, oh, they've already thrown them out. And he said, that's why you're getting so many dams around, because
They're building.
get thrown out, so they gotta go someplace to live, so they're building their own.
And where are we getting funds from, to pay Barry, and where's that coming from?
Right now, from the selectmen's budget. So we may have to go for reserve fund transfer on this, because it's, you know, what started out as a relatively small problem because of the winter and the ice and the rains and that, and the activity levels of the beavers, it's getting to be a problem. He said some of the towns in the area now have him on a retainer where they pay him so much a year to deal with the problem, and that may be something we want to look at next
yeah,
year.
we should
in
get a
terms of
number for
budget.
that and maybe budget that.
Actually, line item budget.
Yeah,
Well, I think when we have our state reps in, I think we need to keep pressing that issue as well, because I think you're right, the change is gonna come in the state level, but on the other hand, you had a referendum that the citizens approved, that I think brought us part of this problem.
yeah. And, you know, I think, and in fairness to our representatives, they can only do so much unless you can get the city legislators to understand the nature of the problem. You know, they probably think beavers are cute. We probably all did until they started invading the backyards, so. And they don't seem quite as cute, but, of course, they probably don't have high opinions of us either.
So do you need a motion on anything?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Until Mike comes up with maybe an annual figure for budgeting, but I guess that would be next year, or a reserve fund transfer for ongoing this year.
Probably it's good to put it in a special article initially so that people will understand that this is an issue, and, you know, like we did this year with the Council on the Arts.
The other thing that can be done is the Board of Health can declare some sort of emergency.
They've done that. They could do
That's-
3
that's-
10-day
Okay, that's
emergency
what gets you
permits.
to 30
yes.
days, all right.
Yeah.
So your emergency can only go on for 30 days, then, is what you're saying?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Anything else on beavers, or are we? Licenses and permits. Medfield Youth Soccer requests permission to place signs announcing registration for the fall soccer season. Signs in place from May 16 to May 30.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Friends of the Medfield Football request permission to hold a car wash fundraiser event behind Town Hall on Saturday, August 30, 2014.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Medfield Lions Club requests a one-day alcohol permit for their event on May 17, 2014, to be held at the Center.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Deborah Kelsey, Library Director, on behalf of the Strategic Planning Committee for the Library Board of Trustees, requests a one-day wine and malt beverage permit for two events, Thursday, May 8, 6 to 8 p.m., and May 10, 1 to 3 p.m.
So moved.
Second. All
Aye.
in favor? Aye. Jennifer Selsar, Manager, Noon Hill Grill, requests permission to open from 10 a.m. on Mother's Day, Sunday, May 11.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Bill Pope, Director of Zulu Gallery, requests use of the town gazebo area and a one-day wine and malt beverage permit for the 5th Annual Art Festival on Saturday, June 14, 7 to 11:30 p.m. Tent set up on Friday, June 13.
That's
Any
Flag
issue
Day,
with
isn't
that?
it?
And no one else is using that, or?
No, no.
Okay.
but,
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Isn't that Flag Day, June 14th?
June 14th is Flag Day.
Yeah.
This is June 13th, yeah.
Pederzini Drive neighbors request a block party permit for May 25. Table set up in the cul-de-sac area at the end of Pederzini Drive.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Council on Aging requests a one-day wine and malt beverage permit for May 7, 4 to 8 p.m., third annual art show. May 14, 5 to 7 p.m., Bermuda Cruise meet and greet gathering. Summer cookouts, 4 to 8 p.m. on June 18, 25, July 9, 16, 23, August 6, 13, and 20.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Yep. And if you go to the summer cookouts, I think you have to get there early, because I think they have a
Sell out,
maximum number and
yeah.
they sell out.
Mm.
They're doing such nice things. Medfield Pop Warner Organization requests permission to place sandwich boards May 7 to 24, announcing continued fall registration.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Cheryl O'Malley, President, Friends of the Dwight Derby House, requests a one-day wine and malt beverage permit for two concert events at the Dwight Derby House. The first is Thursday, May 22nd, from 7 to 10:30 p.m., and the other one is a date to be determined for June.
So do we just do the May one?
Can we do a non-date?
Probably
TBA?
not. I think you need to do a date certain, yeah.
Okay, so we'll do the May
Yes,
22nd
okay.
date.
I move that we give the Dwight Derby House permission for the one-day wine malt beverage permit for Thursday, May 22nd, from 7 to 10:30 p.m.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Medfield State Hospital status update. Do we need to update more?
I don't think so.
Okay.
The only two things I had was a discussion of Shaq coming in, which we've covered.
Yep.
And then I didn't know, since you were there, Pete, if you wanted to just update on the hearing we had at the State House.
Sure, the hearing went very smoothly, quickly. Denise Garlick, our state rep, told us that they liked maps, and sure enough, when Steve Nolan, the chair of the State Hospital Advisory Committee, asked what they would like to hear, the chair of the committee, co-chair of the committee, said that they always loved maps, and so that they were shown a map, a picture of aerial photo of the hospital, and explained which parcels were going where. The only question that was asked was what's happening to the money, and they asked that of the DCAM commissioner, Carol Cornelison. It was a well-attended hearing. Steve Nolan, the chair of the SHAC, was there. I was there. Christine was there. Denise Garlick was there to introduce us. Let's see.
Senator Timothy's office had.
Senator Chimley's office had a staff person, whose name I don't remember now, Liz, somebody or other, Liz Brody. And DCAM had the commissioner, they had Mary Beth Clancy, they had Dana Harrell, they had Martha Mahone, Deputy General Counsel, and John, somebody or other, who I've never quite figured out what he does, but he seems to appear at a lot of things. I know he was at the negotiation meetings a lot of the times.
That's a lot of firepower for a 3-minute hearing.
Well, it actually it probably went for 10 minutes maybe, but still.
Yeah. I think the shortness of the hearing and the limited questions was due to the work that Representative Garlick did.
Yes.
Getting everybody prepared for the hearing, so.
And that was a difficult time for them because it was the first day of the House budget hearing, so they were bouncing back and forth.
It was actually the day that
Yeah.
they passed the House budget, I think, wasn't it, that night?
That night, yeah.
Yeah,
And they had been
around-
in session till after midnight the night before, so everybody was a little edgy.
Representative Garlick was looking a little
Yes.
tired. She said she'd been working 12-hour days, 10 to 10, I think.
And her
for
staff looked
quite a
even more
while.
tired.
Yes, yes. Remember the year when they did the budget hearing, they had Lida Harkins barefoot on the floor of the House? They had a picture in the Globe, was it? I
Oh,
think so.
funny.
Yeah.
She said, you try to wear heels for 3 days straight.
No, thanks. Where do we stand on the surveying work for the water tower land and the easement water tower?
I'm
water
just
main
waiting for
easement?
the contract to come through. The proposal and the contract will come from DCAM.
Okay,
The town is responsible for the cost of the survey as part of the closing costs.
And is
That's in the
DCAM picking the
legislation.
surveyor?
DCAM has picked the surveyor, which is Judy Nitsch, who did the first compiled
all
survey. I met with Mary Beth Clancy last week and Jeremy Marset from Water and Sewer. And he thought, given the amount of survey work he does in his job as an engineer, that it was an incredibly good price for doing that survey.
Oh, good, excellent.
And we're gonna try and do the water tower and the state hospital all at the same time to save, on that. So, a little 2-for-1 deal.
And where will we pay that? Will that come out of the 175,000?
Between the 175,000 and there's, I just got a bill from Andrea today, so I don't know what the balance is after I get that bill. I try to open those in the morning, not in the evening. But between those two articles, last year and this year, that money should come out of that. Although water and sewer, can cover some of the costs of the water tower, survey.
Survey,
Out of their
okay, yeah,
costs,
that's right.
yeah.
yeah.
I did ask Representative Garlick about the process from here on out. There's only one public hearing required, so that the public hearing is behind us on this bill, but it does have to go through several committees at this point, so our goal is to get, our hope is that the legislation gets passed before the legislature dissolves at the end of July.
Well, it has to, right? So it's gone through one committee, it has additional committees now in the House before it goes to the Senate?
It has several other committees, yep.
And then the bid, the prices for the water main contract was there. We're gonna pass that on to town council, have them draw up the contracts, and then have it on there for your signature. I think they have to make the award, is it 35 or 65 days they have to make an award?
I think it's 35. but I don't know,
35,
yeah.
okay, so we'll try to get that signed, because it was a very good price. We had 12 bids on it, and the low price was $1,650,000, so it's well under the engineer's estimates
That was for the water tower?
for the
Water
main.
main.
the
For the
main.
water main.
Yeah, the water tower's still under design, and they expect that to go out to bid in July, so.
And I guess that's the next thing on our, well, no, I saw the water mains here somewhere, I thought.
I think it was right above the beaver activity.
Okay. Oh, yes, I skipped over that one. Refer to town council for preparation of contracts for Hospital Road water main improvements. That's because we had an extra vote in there, Richard, that you created, so I thought that my vote went with that one. But is there anything more that we need to report about the water mains, or is that the total report on that, Mike?
No, I
Okay.
think it's they've checked out the references, and the low bidder seems to be qualified and very acceptable, so.
Great, good price, good. Selectman report?
What I have is, because we were so busy, everyone was so busy for a town meeting, there's a number of things that I think came up in the winter before that. I just wanted to kind of re-go over where we were with that. One was the railroad crossing. I think we're all set on the Farm Street. The chief is okay with Farm Street. Am I correct on that? 'Cause I had talked to him.
I believe so, yeah.
And Harding Street, my
He's
understanding.
okay in terms of that we'll take the track out?
Yes, there's a line that goes across Farm Street and also Harding Street that is no longer in use.
Correct.
And I've gotten several calls and letters from people that live either north or south of those lines that constantly go over and that bump, 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 bump because they're hitting, and there's no real need for those tracks to be there. They're not being used anymore. And our Roland
LaValle.
LaValle, thank you. The engineer has a good relationship, I guess, with the MBTA, and he finally got, my understanding is, permission is if the Board of Selectmen gives a letter that they can remove, because right now our DPW cannot touch the tracks because they're not our tracks. But according to Roland, they have no issue with that, and if we put a letter, we can pull those tracks out and tar over it.
Excellent, good.
Now, my understanding is from Christine, the last meeting, that Chief Meany had an issue on the Harding Street one with the fear that coming down the hill of Harding Street would become like a speedway as it goes into West Mill. My only suggestion was, and I know commuting off of Hartford Street, taking High Rock Road in Westwood through those neighborhoods, and I'm sure the neighbors there complain because of the volume of commuter traffic that goes through their neighborhood. They've put a series of, they call them speed humps that are there, and I'm wondering if we take the track out at Harding Street, if we can just put one of those speed humps in, if that's the concern the chief has.
You have potential liability there, because if someone hits those pumps and, hits their head on the roof of the car or loses control.
But Westwood has, there must be 8 or 9 of them now on High Rock and that whole development off of Hartford Street.
I would talk to council first before you make any moves in those areas. But for one thing, taking out the railroad tracks on Farm Street is not going to solve the problem most people think, because the problem is more than hitting the railroad tracks. It's when you come down that hill, it levels off and then goes down again. And when a car comes down too fast, they scrape the bottom or they scrape their rear end because they're going too fast over the speed limit. Now, when I talked to the chief, he didn't want to straighten that out and level it off.
Right.
Because he's afraid that the cars coming down Farm Street, where we've had some bad accidents at
Right.
Farm and North Street, it would encourage them to speed up. So when they got to the intersection with North, it'd be, increase the
Right, no, I agree with him on that, and the chief, when I talked to him, did feel the tracks themselves could come out. In fact, he thought it was, for
Yeah.
bicycles and motorcycles, it's dangerous having the track in there.
Yeah, I
But-
guess you have to put a barrier across the end, though, where you take the tracks out to the edge of the road, you have to put posts or something, or, some kind of a fence, so that,
But I don't believe the chief has any issue with the Farm Street.
no, but he doesn't, I just don't want people to think that's gonna solve the problem that most of them have concerns about. Most of them think the problem is with the railroad tracks.
Right.
It's with where it levels off.
Right,
And if they go too fast, they're still gonna scrape bottom or scrape their rear ends. And in a way, you want that, because that
Slows them
serves
down.
the function of a speed bump. But putting speed bumps in, my understanding from town council is there have been lawsuits where they have put in speed bumps and people have, had damage to their teeth, or they've hit their head on the roof of a car, or they've lost control of a car, so.
I just noticed Westwood, there must be at least 7 or 8 of them that they've just put in. It's just a gentle hump that could go, if the concern was that's going to be too much of a speedway.
What street?
Harding
is this
Street.
on? No,
Harding Street just before West Mill.
What I would suggest,
Westwood, I mean.
No, in Westwood, it's High Rock Road. If you go Hartford Street, just before the center,
Yeah.
and that's High Rock Road that crosses.
Okay.
And you take that left, and then you can cut through those neighborhoods and come out on the other side, on Summer Street, the other side of Westwood Center. You can bypass all of Westwood Center, which a large commuter population does. And I'm sure the neighbors in that area didn't like all the traffic coming through, so they put at least 7 of these speed humps through. And there's a sign that says, speed hump 20 miles an hour, and then you go through a series of them.
Well, I'd talk to Mark before you vote to do anything like that, to make sure that we're on solid ground when we do it.
Okay.
Sometimes I think it, like I remember when they were putting crosswalks in up in Dover, and they put the brick crosswalks. 'Cause the neighbors insisted that they put them up.
They
and
had
then-
speed bumps there, actually. They were elevated.
Well, they were elevated, and then the neighbors were complaining, because every time a landscape truck went over with the trailers, they were
They were making a lot of noise.
clanging, and then
Yeah.
the neighbors want them taken out, so,
They did take them out.
did they? Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's better to learn from somebody else's experience, so.
There is
Okay,
a pothole statute in Massachusetts, Mike, that any defect in a public way, the maximum recovery is $5,000.
5,000, yeah.
They call it the pothole statute because it's basically to get your car fixed from
I
the,
think that a defect, a design defect may be different from a pothole
Maybe.
defect.
yeah,
So-
well, that's for Mark Sorrell.
Can I make a motion then that we have the letter go then for Farm Street? And that maybe citizens, the residents that live off of Harding Street up in the Hospital Road, Evergreen, Marlin, Hickory area that use that street, if they want to voice an opinion, they can do so. And in the meantime,
I would voice an opinion on that because I live up there and I would take those tracks out. And what I would do, what I would suggest is that we take the tracks out and then we see if there's a problem. I don't think there's going to be that much of a problem because Harding is so windy just before that railroad crossing that people aren't carrying much speed into that little hill. The speed limit, once you get down to where the pond is 40 miles an hour. It's a pretty fast speed limit. And so that,
Chief was going to look at a stop sign too, I thought, on,
there's a stop sign now on West Mill for coming on to Harding. I'd still like to hear what Chief Meany had to say on the Harding Street one.
oh, sure, yeah, well, yeah.
I
I'd
noticed
encourage him to take the
Yeah,
tracks
when I-
out there.
When I go up to the senior center there in the morning for the breakfast, I notice some people come down Harding Street and take a pretty wide turn there. They swing pretty far out into the
Not
intersection.
most. No, most people coming down the hill actually hug the corner. When you look at, because I run by there a lot, and you see where the gravel is, where the people are driving, people hug the corner. Okay, so that's railroad tracks. Next,
So my motion then is that we have the letter go on Farm Street and that we consult again with the chief and town council and any of the residents that use that street to give some feedback so we can deal with the issue of Harding Street. But
Can
my
I-
motion would be on Farm Street.
can I suggest that we, instead of doing your motion your way, can I suggest that we include Harding Street and give the chief the right to exclude it if he thinks that it should be excluded? And then we don't have to come back and revisit it with another letter.
Okay. My motion then is for both Farm and Harding Street with input on the chief, particularly on Harding Street.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
I received a letter from Alex Stevens concerning litter and dog droppings and a bigger issue of having a cleanup day. I know you've mentioned that in the past. Let me just take a second, I don't know if you've seen his letter. Let me just read this, it's not that long. He writes, as the snow has melted, it's pretty astounding as to how much litter and dog droppings were buried in the snowbanks. An area that strikes me as particularly bad for litter is the Hartford Street, Rocky Woods, the Dover line area. As for dog droppings, the trails behind Wheelock School are full of it. I had a question on town bylaws relative to littering and not picking up after dogs. I wanted to know what the current penalty/fine was for littering or for failing to clean up after a dog. I was wondering if the fines and penalties were increased and publicized, if it would deter people from littering and encourage them to clean up after their dogs. For example, if the fine with littering was very high, like $500, if it was posted on major roadways entering town, would that discourage litter bugs? And if there were signs at town-owned property, like at the Wheelock, saying the fine for failing to pick up after your dog was, say, $50 or $100, et cetera, then maybe a penalty of being disinvited from using the property for further offenses. Would something like this encourage people to do a better job of picking up? So he raises two issues. One is the amount of litter in town and how we can have Medfield be a cleaner community, and then the issue of people not picking up after their dogs. So I don't know, I look at some neighboring towns that do some cleanup. I'm wondering in the future whether some private organizations, be it the Lions or New in Town, I know in the schools, both the student councils at the high school and the middle school do a tremendous job of community service. I noticed coming home today that the Norfolk County Sheriff had people picking up littering along the way, and I think that the towns can get access to that. I don't know if Medfield wants to do that. I know we've used prisoners in the past for some things.
I
But-
feel a little leery of using high school kids on Hartford Street, though, because I think
Yeah.
that's very dangerous.
Yeah, you'd have to really have it well controlled. I mean, you don't want to put anyone in harm's way, safety.
Yeah.
But he raises two issues. One is with the litter and the other is with the dog droppings.
I think the problem with the littering is, and I agree, and I've talked to Ken Feeney about this, the people that don't clean up after their pets. And, it's not just rude, it's a public health hazard. I remember a few years ago when kids with soccer teams and football players were getting giardia because there was, at that time, I think it was the duck droppings, but the duck droppings can be just as dangerous. And it's kind of really pathetic that people can't clean up after their pets, especially when the town makes land available to them to walk their pets.
Do we have a bylaw about that?
There is, but it's tough to enforce. It's one of those, the police don't like to enforce it, the courts don't like to enforce it. It's a question of, I almost think if you could deputize somebody to go out, like an animal control person or something, go out and start slapping fines on people for littering, but you really need somebody that's dedicated to it.
Well, I mean, that's the police function. I mean, the police should be doing it if we have a bylaw, but, whether or not they're able to do it. I mean, you can't be
Must be
watching all
tough
the
to-
dog walkers at Wheelock probably on a regular basis, so. It
Well,
really is a-
when the chief comes in, we ought to talk to him about that and see if he could find some way to encourage his men to start issuing fines for,
I know that Park and Rec has been bothered by it with the fields
Yes.
up at the hospital.
yeah.
I mean, they don't want people playing golf up there, because then they end up with golf balls on their fields, and people still do that all the time. So it's a hard thing to control behaviors.
Mm.
They had all kinds of, Park and Rec had all kinds of signs up at the hospital fields that, telling you all the things you couldn't do, and people stole the signs.
I remember when Conservation put signs up, that, no hunting on their property, and there were bullet holes in the signs. So,
Hmm.
guess they were sending a message, so.
And as far as the litter, I don't know whether we can, how to control that, or,
Last year, we did ask Ken to organize a townwide cleanup day on the major streets in town, and then he didn't do it. He reported back that he was, I don't know if he ever knew about it, that we'd asked him to do it, actually, but when he came in here, he mentioned something about the garage, and I think he maybe was too busy. I
he's
don't know.
probably, they're probably, I mean, they're out, they're out in full force trying to, get the highway garage and everything done. I'm wondering if there's, either through Norfolk County Sheriff or others, we can get some assistance with that. And I walk all over town. I know some particular areas now, the Causeway, Noon Hill, Hartford Street area, even Main Street, just the number of cans and bottles and things that are on the side of the street
Yep.
is bad.
Lazy
And my-
slobs that think the world's their mother's is gonna pick
Yeah.
up after them.
Well, my thought was that we just have a day that we designate as a pickup Medfield Day, and that we encourage people to walk around with a garbage bag on their walks, and just pick up on Causeway, on Hartford Street, on Hospital Road, all the different major roads in town. The only thing that I was asking the DPW to do was to go around and pick up the bags. I didn't think that was a big deal for them to do.
But I wonder if because some of these civic groups do such a good job, and maybe we're putting too much on them, but groups like the Lions in New in Town, or even putting out to some of the different civic groups that get that actually organized, and maybe they could work with the DBW, who could then pick up all that, just drive by with the trucks.
I've asked different civic groups in town, because I've been trying to get this going for about 5 or 6 years, and no one seems interested in doing it, of the groups that I've asked.
They seem to be interested in doing it along the river, you know, the Charles River
Yeah,
cleanup.
well, they just had a cleanup a week or so
River
ago.
Watershed organizes
Right.
that, and Medfield Green gets involved in that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons they gave me, that they weren't interested in picking up the streets in the town, that they were already doing that.
We need 100 Dan Nyes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dan Nye, I found, he walks every day, and he carries a bag with him and just picks up all kinds of litter as he walks,
Mhm.
and then just, recycles it. But if we could give a call maybe to Norfolk County, if they could help. If you want, Mr. Chairman, I'll just put a letter out
Sure. If
Yeah,
you
I'll
can-
show it
if
to
you
the
can
board
figure out a way to
first.
do it.
to the different groups and see if we can get, one, just to organize, get it organized, and maybe use our DPW, as you say, to actually pick it up. And maybe either, if we can get it done before everyone leaves in the summer, or maybe in the fall when people come back.
It's a perfect time right now,
Right
because
now
of
is
the fact
ideal.
that the leaves aren't fully out.
Okay. Next, just a follow-up with the Montrose School and that Cushman house with those broken windows. I just have a fear that they're just letting that,
I'll,
I know you mentioned that before, and
yeah, I think they're far enough along on the building now, they probably, it should.
that looks
be,
good. The building they're doing is coming right along.
Okay, I'll check with them.
The other thing I had a request from the folks in the Pondview High Street area of that traffic island that's there, to see if we could get our DPW, like they do at all the other traffic islands, to leaf blow that out and to put some mulch in there.
Yeah, I don't, although that, we have these all over town, do you want the town to start becoming responsible for,
Well, they've done almost all the traffic islands. They do a good job at that. It looks nice.
yeah, but those are, you know, these are private where they were
No, it's
in
a-
the, in the agreement they had for the subdivision, they were responsible for it.
But no one's ever actually showed me that. And my understanding was that there was someone that on their own used to do that, and then they moved away, unfortunately.
I believe the planning board used to put a requirement in the subdivision. I know, for example, there's one on, I think it's Dover Farm Road, the end of Dover Farm Road. You've got one at Pondview, you have one at,
Tubbrook.
Trailside, or Tubbrook when you come in town. There's a lot of them around that.
Well, can you check, because I don't know, can you check if there is actually such an agreement? If not, we do all the other traffic islands. And it would not take them 15 minutes, to do that.
That's how it starts. Then you gotta plant flowers and you gotta.
Well, I mean, if it's town property, if it's something the planning board has said that neighborhood has to do, I understand that. But if it's town property and we're doing all the other traffic islands, I don't think we should exclude on public ways, unless the planning board did document some language to that effect.
Well, and Mike, while you're checking with the DPW about that one, I know that the Garden Club had asked the DPW to do some work around the signs, the Welcome to Medfield signs.
Yep.
And they did some of that at one of them, I think, but not the other ones. And so that maybe if they have some, I know that Bobby Kennedy's often looking for things for the guys to do, and it'd be nice to get those, because the minute that they put the little stone barriers or walls around those, then the garden club's gonna plant them.
The other one is a question that now that the meals tax has passed, how does that work, and when does that go into effect?
The town clerk notified, hey, you have to notify by May 1st. So Carol sent by email and by fax information to the state with a certified copy of the vote. And the state is supposed to start collecting that. When I read through the regulations governing that, they said for the first year, you should anticipate it takes effect, that it would take effect on August 1st.
August 1st?
Yeah, and that you should only anticipate getting 10 months receipts the first year because the following June would come in July. They distribute it quarterly. They send money out to the towns quarterly, I believe. It's collected by the state, so the state has to take care of the paperwork, notify the restaurants, and they have to change over their cash register, so it will record both the local tax and the state tax.
And then where does that go in our budget?
It goes under local receipts. It'd be local receipt or state, it wouldn't be state aid, but I think it probably goes to local receipt.
And at some point, is it the Board of Selectmen or others, we talked about when we passed this at town meeting, and I know Gus Murby spoke about of getting support with that, with the ideas that if you are going to tax the restaurants and the businesses in the center, that perhaps some of that money should go towards the beautification of the center. Who actually
Right.
decides that?
Town meeting ultimately, I think, probably would be the one that should decide it, I would think.
So we would make a recommendation, town meeting would accept?
I think it's one of those, you bring it to town meeting, ask what they, what their preference is. Because I think there was some discussion at town meeting that it should be used to reduce the property tax.
Correct.
So, I think if you put it all towards downtown redevelopment, people would say, well, why do we vote these if we're not going to benefit on our
Well,
property tax?
I think part of Gus's argument was that it's a burden on the restaurants that are in the downtown area. And so if we beautify the downtown area near their properties, that's going to bring more people in.
Maybe you would take some of it, but I don't think you should take all of it.
No,
I think
I'm
some
not
of it should
suggesting
go
that.
to the-
I'm suggesting,
But,
but
yeah.
some of that we talked about, I think, should go towards the downtown area. For example, the Straw Hat Park, meeting house, tree plantings, other things that are going to beautify the downtown area, so more people are going to come into Medfield, go to the restaurants, and offset what taxes, perhaps, the burden that might put on the restaurants.
Mm.
But you're absolutely correct. We also mentioned that it could go for property tax relief as well.
Yeah. When we're reviewing budgets next year, maybe when you have your kickoff budget meeting with the warrant committee, that ought to be a topic for discussion to figure if there's going to be some caution, because, there probably are other things that some people would say, well, we ought to use it for schools, or we ought to use it to build the public safety building, or we ought to, there's a variety of things you could use it for.
Okay. And then, I think you have it down on the calendar there. What's the time schedule as far as the selectmen issuing RFPs for Lot 3?
My understanding is the Economic Development Committee met last Thursday, and they want to come in and meet with the board to discuss that they're putting together an RFP. They're working on putting together an RFP, and then they're going to get that out to the board for review.
Okay.
So that you'll need to think about too, because, I keep getting information that, from Mr. Borelli, that, support my project, but it's not his project. It's up to the town to decide how it wants to use that. Now, maybe his project will be the one that
Right.
is selected, but I don't think he should be assuming that it's his project that's
Right.
going to go there, because it may not be. So I think you need to think about how the RFP should be directed so that it can look at what the town wants to go there. And it may be Mr. Borelli's project, but it may not be. It may be something entirely different. And how the RFP goes out will somewhat determine that.
So town council needs to be in on that meeting then, too?
Well, and you people need to be in terms of what do you want to see there? I think because of all the newspaper advertisements and the publicity that's gone out from Mr. Borelli, I think a lot of people assume that's what's going to go there. But I think the board has to talk to the public and find out what the public really would like to see there, and maybe it's that, maybe it isn't, maybe it's a scaled-down version of what he's proposing. I think what he's proposing is 2 to 3 times the size of the town garage. And I know everybody goes by and says, oh, that town garage is huge. You double or triple that, and it's pretty big, so.
So is the Economic Development Committee, when are they coming in?
I think that when they get, I have a tentative schedule here for them. When was it?
September 2nd.
September 2nd, yeah.
So is that the first time they'll come in with the,
Well, if they have their RFP done before that, they may want to come in earlier.
Okay.
You know, well, I'll check with them, and Sarah has been working with them and see if they may want to send you a draft of it to get some input from you people before then, too.
next thing, Mr. Chairman, was, and again, I've had several calls on this. Medfield, as you know, has a large amount of conservation land, and I think some of this came about after the Kenny property was approved at town meeting, and I know we're waiting to hear on that. But there's a call that if we could put together, and maybe this is under the Conservation Commission, but we have a lot of conservation land in town, but I don't think a lot of people know where all the properties are, and where to park, and where the trails are, and maps, and it would be nice if we could maybe get the Conservation Commission to get like a subcommittee that would put a map out, and then we could put it online perhaps as well, but to show, here's all the different properties.
They actually have a map like that.
We have that.
Yeah, we have that.
That show
You
all
can get
the
it, you
other
can get it downstairs
trails.
in the lobby. It's in
Where
that
the
little
parking is and
table in
everything?
the lobby.
Oh, we do have
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
We did.
What we don't have is good marking. If you go to Jade Walk, you'll never find the trail, because it's basically
Well,
kind of across
who's in
somebody's
charge
lawn.
who's in charge of that? Is that conservation?
Well, conservation is, but there was another group a few years ago that set up called the Forest and Trails Association. It was just a sort of an ad hoc group.
Someone told me that David Lafreniere, who was the force
Yes.
behind that, has moved.
Yes, yes.
And the town had a trails committee when I first became a selectman, and we worked on standards for trails,
Yeah.
what should be built.
But it would generally fall under conservation, and maybe when they come in, we ought to talk to them about how they could get moving on that, because I agree with you, we're trying to set up a system where we have a trail system connecting major parcels of land in the town, and we pretty well completed the acquisition of those parcels. Now we need to start linking them. For one of the things, we've always talked about creating a link from the town center to Rocky Woods. And the only thing at this point now, we need to get a trail easement through the Brown property, which they've agreed to provide, but we need to get it surveyed and get an agreed
Isn't there a
upon
problem as
route.
to where it's supposed to be there? I thought that was what was hanging that up.
The what?
I thought the actual location of that easement was what was hanging
It
it up,
is,
because they
yeah.
agreed to give an easement
Yeah,
years
yeah.
ago.
yeah.
But I think here's something that we have, it's very special in Medfield. We have a lot of open space like that we could market
Yes.
the town as well. And I know you've mentioned before, even all the land we have along the Charles River, if there was some sort of a boardwalk or something that could, a trailway, now that would be federal funds and things like that, but
The thing you gotta remember about the land along the river, when that land was purchased by the Army Corps of Engineers, we fought to give the property owners the right to either sell it to the federal government in fee simple or to sell a flood restriction. Most of the landowners elected to sell a flood restriction, so they still own the property, and you don't have rights to cross that property because it's still private property. The only thing that they have given up is the right to
Develop it.
flood it.
So how about all along Route
It's a
27?
flood
across
storage
from-
easement. What?
All along Route 27 across from the transfer station? Do we know who, is that in private ownership, or is that in the Army Corps in that area?
Most of that, I think, across from the transfer station is probably in either the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or the federal government. But if you get down, for example, between Bridge and
where the houses are.
yeah, between West and Main Street, most of that's privately held.
Yeah.
But
okay.
my point is, maybe if we could look at where there are areas that we could make wider trails. I know the thing with the deer, chicks, and others are an issue that, you know, you want people to stay on the trails, that we have properly marked trails. Maybe there's something through Congressman Kennedy's office, I mean, I have no idea, that we could get some boardwalks, walking areas along the Charles River, to really kind of publicize that, so, because several people in town have told me they have no idea where our conservation land is, and they're very surprised to know we have all this. A way to better publicize that, make it more obvious so people know where they can hike and where they can go, because we do have a lot of land, and I don't think we've overly publicized that land,
No.
and a lot of the trails are not
No.
easily accessible or marked.
I don't know if the map of the conservation lands is on the website even. I mean, that should be on the website. I've never noticed it there, but I don't know every page of the website.
Yeah, why don't you ask Leslie if she'd put together a map to put on the,
But maybe we
The other-
can raise that when they come to the,
Yeah, and the other thing is marking the trailheads. As I say, that one on Jade Walk,
it looks like it's
It
somebody's yard.
it
It
won't,
is, yeah.
it won't last.
well, we can make it last. I mean, we can.
No, you can't.
Oh, yes, we will. Yes, we will. But let me just ask one question, Chris, because I know when we were working on the trails, the issue at that time was that we didn't have a GPS map of all the trails, that somebody needed to go out and walk the trails with a GPS transmitter or something. Has that happened at this point, do
I
we?
believe Dave did most of that work.
Oh, okay, so do we have a map that has all the trails?
We have a layer in the GIS. I don't think anybody's undertaken creating an actual map that shows that. But we have the ability
Oh,
to do
okay,
that.
yeah, I'd like to go, take a look at that sometime then with you, if I could.
The ones that used to go out and walk the trails were Ralph and John Kelly and Herbie Burr. They used
They
to
were
go out.
putting the new signs up a few
Yeah.
years ago.
Mr. Massaro?
I just wanted to make a comment about that. You might consider, as part of your master planning, overlapping this issue of conservation land. I had mentioned before to Chairman Peterson the issue of what's called available land as it related to 40B, and one of the projects that we were going to look at was trying to get
Steve Brown did that, and we fell way short of.
No, Steve and I have talked to Steve, and Steve has suggested it would be worth revisiting again in terms of getting all of the Corps of Engineers land, getting all of the roads, getting all of the school land, getting all of that mapped in. So I would just ask that you consider and take another look at it.
All of that will come in the master plan, in the open space plan that's currently.
Right, so you tie that GIS information in with with your master plan, you'll get everything that you think that.
I think what Bill's referring to, there's a provision in 40B that if over a certain proportion of your land is dedicated to conservation, open space, recreation, that you're exempt from 40B. But it's very difficult to meet that criteria. I know several towns have tried.
Yeah, as I said, there was some discussion. We got sidetracked because of the issues of purchasing the property and everything else, but just before, we had looked at it, and I believe that Stephen Brown thought that it might be a good idea to revisit that again, especially since at
It
least
might
one
be a-
town has had some success
I know he put
using
a
it.
lot of work in on it. It'd be good to get the information that he's put together, because I know at the time he felt we were way short of the amount.
Yeah,
But,
well,
you know, but we
And
can
our
talk to him.
conversations with the state made it clear that that was not going to happen, that they would fight that.
Well, they can't, I'm not sure they can fight it if it's in the legislation. If you meet the criteria, but it's meeting the criteria, for
Well, I think they were
example.
going to make it very hard for us to meet the criteria
Yeah.
on it.
but again, they haven't done it, and it's not that significant an effort to crank it in with the GIS information while you're doing the rest of this other
He
activity.
did it. It needs to be updated, you know, in light of other properties we've got, but, you know, so.
Okay, the other issue we had raised before, we got a little bit sidetracked, was, again, Upham Road, with that issue there. Now, there is an owner of an apartment building that I walk by all the time, that his property that faces the Thomas Upham House is never, that site is never used for parking. You could probably put at least 6 or 7 cars there, which seem to be the problem, because I believe they're the people that work at the Thomas Upham House. I don't know if some kind of an arrangement could be made with the owner of that apartment building, Or, as the chief maybe suggested, there is that wooden fence that runs along the town-owned park area where Meeting House Pond area was, the grass area there, whether that could be moved slightly inland. Right now, it's kind of falling apart. And he thought if it could be moved in a little bit, then maybe a car could get off the road. So perhaps see if we can get an owner to allow parking on the apartment area and maybe moving that fence in. If we could look at that, because Upham Road clearly is an issue. Now, the snow is gone, it's not going to be as much of an issue until we get November, December again next year. So I don't know where to go with what to do on Upham Road.
Well, why don't we ask the chief for a recommendation on that? I think he can probably take a look and get together with Ken and see if they can come up with a solution that would work.
Okay.
Oh.
It certainly is an ongoing problem. I walked down there last weekend, and it was a mess.
Yeah, it's also a bit of a cutoff too, and I'll be the first to admit that at times I've cut off, used that myself.
Yep.
I do all the
To
time.
avoid the center, you kind of scoot
Yep.
around there if you're coming from the post office.
Yep.
Save yourself 2 minutes at the light.
And maybe it's not even our authority, but somehow for the owner of the Thomas Upham House to get a hold of the owner of the apartment building to see if they could make use of that lot that clearly is not being used. There's at least 6 or 7 spots there.
Yeah, it's just a question of whether it's available all times of the day, I suppose. But yeah, can we ask the chief to talk to that owner? That's a creative solution.
Walpole, I can't remember what his name was. Is it
I don't know.
Kelleher or something like that, or?
And then we raised the issue of the signage on for Park Street businesses. Where can we go with that? What's the
Chris?
route?
Sarah, John, and I are trying to find a solution for that,
Okay,
so we're working on it.
okay, thank you.
There is another issue on West Mill Street where an owner has done some work fixing up his property, and he would like to put a sign, but because of the layout of the road and the location of the pavement within that layout, he'd have to put it 57 feet back from the edge of pavement, which would almost make it impossible for most people to see. So I'd like to talk to you folks and maybe see if you can, you could still comply with the requirement that it be 25 feet back from the edge of road. But in order to comply with 25 feet back from the edge of layout, it would have to be 57 feet back from the edge of the road. Because the layout is so far skewed, the pavement is so far skewed to one side of the layout. It's basically Sam White's property.
So, and you mentioned to me on the phone that he had an idea of, he was gonna do a boulder, and so
Yeah,
maybe he
have a
could come up
picture
with
of
some
the
sort
sign,
of drawing of it or whatever, and
Yeah.
and then let us
Okay.
see it.
Okay.
And a plan where he's thinking of putting it.
I thought it looked attractive. It just lacks common sense to have the sign back 55 feet when you can't see it.
Right.
But I would like, because I know when the sign committee came in here before we make a decision, I just want to make sure that we get some advice from the sign committee.
Sure.
Just to explain, I mean, just common sense says you're not going to have a sign 55 feet back. And it's because of the way that road is laid out. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, if they went from the edge of where the road actually ends, then he would be within like 7 feet of the setback. Is that correct?
Where he's proposing to put it, he'd still be 25 feet back. from
So
the-
he would be 25 feet back from where the road ends, which is what the sign bylaw requires, correct?
Yes, but it requires it for the edge of the layout
Right.
rather than the edge of the road.
Right, but because the way that layout goes in so far,
Yeah.
if you took it from the edge of the actual street
Yeah,
and you went back, he would be within, if that was the layout, he would be within,
He
The
would meet
regulations.
the requirement, the 25 feet setback requirement. I didn't realize when I talked to Sarah, in the business district, the setback, sign setback is 7 feet. In the industrial district, it's 25 feet. So he's 32, the edge of the layout is 32 feet from the edge of the pavement. So if he put it back 25 feet from the edge of the pavement, he'd still be within the layout of the street. And if he were to comply with the zoning bylaw, he'd have to go another 25 feet back. So you're 25 plus 7 plus 25 is 57
Right,
feet.
and then that doesn't make sense, and then you can't see the sign. But is there a way somehow we can get the sign folks involved in this as well, and see if we can get
And
something common sense to,
Technically, the way the zoning bylaw works, the zoning doesn't apply to streets. It only applies to land. It doesn't apply to layouts. You, as a board of survey, control the streets.
oh, so actually the sign would be on the street?
Would be within the layout, yeah.
But why don't we just ask the opinion of the sign
Yeah.
bylaw committee?
Because I think last time they said they were upset about the Hunt Club, or the Westwood Gun Club or something sign they never knew about, so
Yeah.
I think we kind of told them we would make sure we
I
kept
think
them
that
in the
we
loop.
should run things by them.
Okay. The other thing, can we have a list, are there other boards and commissions that need committee members? I know the Board of Health is still short, I know the Downtown Study Committee is missing. Are there other boards that need members that maybe we can begin to advertise for, to try to fill? I don't know if it's only those two, or there's many more, I have no idea.
I think for a while, the Historic District Committee might have needed some, but they're very specific requirements, so they full now? Okay, so, yeah.
So do you know any other besides the Board of Health and the Downtown Study? Are those the only two?
I'd have to look at the list off the top of my head. Those are the
And-
two that I can think of.
The library director is interested in being on the downtown study committee, Deborah Kelsey.
Oh. We can do that non-town resident, correct?
For
Well,
which-
she could be an ex
You never
officio.
really, yeah, I think you'd have to be an ex officio, because there was a discussion about that about a year ago.
For which committee is this?
Downtown
That-
study.
Whether or
Downtown
not,
Study.
even if you're a town employee, but you're not a resident, then you'd be an ex officio, not a voting member of that committee.
Well, I think they applied that to town employees because they felt town employees shouldn't be voting on town committees. I'm not so sure, particularly in the downtown, because frequently you have businessmen that have businesses in the
Right,
town.
they might not live in town.
Taxpayers, it seems to me they ought to be able to vote. You could do that if you wanted to have town residents only, and that probably makes sense for, boards that aren't particularly involved with commercial property, but I think when you
There
deal
was
with
an issue with
commercial
Eric
property-
O'Brien because of his
Yeah.
moving out of town. I don't remember
Oh, yeah.
which board it
Right.
was, but I
Yes,
thought that we agreed that he could serve on a particular.
It was the downtown study committee.
Oh,
Open
is he on the
space.
downtown study committee?
He's on
Oh,
open
now open
space.
space, but he was
Yeah.
originally taken off the downtown study committee because he was not a resident of Medfield.
Oh, he was taken off of it.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, but I don't see a need for that. I think to my mind, if they're a businessman and.
Well, I think Deborah would be an excellent person, I mean, she's
Yeah.
run this
Absolutely.
downtown, and she's very
Yeah.
involved into the whole entire downtown.
Yeah.
I just didn't know whether there's any legal,
No, you had made a policy, I shouldn't say made a policy, had a discussion that town employees shouldn't be voting members of committees that don't live in town.
But it's a policy that
You
can be
change.
changed.
you have an opinion on that, Mr. Chairman?
I guess I don't have a real strong opinion on it one way or the other. It seems to me that we've just, historically, we haven't appointed people that are not residents to town committees except as an ex officio. I know we appointed some Westwood doctor to the Lyme Disease Study Committee. We're carrying him along as ex officio. He hasn't been to a meeting since he was appointed. But he was appointed ex officio because he didn't live in town. Deborah Kelsey would be a very active member of the Downtown Study Committee. And part of it is that it doesn't really matter whether you're an official committee member and have a vote, so much as most of these committees don't take very controversial votes, that it makes a difference whether people are voting members or not. The question is usually just getting the work done and moving the project along.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm
it's
fine with
very,
that.
it's very rare that it's a 3-2 vote on most committees anyway, you know, I can't.
No. So if we could maybe just look, are there other boards or committees that need members? And if so, maybe at our meetings, we can begin to publicize to have those boards filled. The other thing is,
Should we appoint Deborah Kelsey to the
I
downtown
so
study?
moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Columbia Gas was going to, said we were top on their list of repaving Adams Street. Can we double check how they're doing with that?
Okay.
I actually have the guy's card if you need that.
Where's that 9 o'clock whistle when we need it?
I'm almost done. 2 more things here. And maybe we can put this off, but I received, I don't have a lot of information, but a email concerning a town-wide newsletter from a Robert Herb Zuber, which is kind of an interesting concept that he raised. And that was my last point.
What was the concept?
The
He's
concept
interested in-
was, it's almost like the old Monday news that Bob Letman had, if you remember.
Oh,
And the library is thinking of bringing back the Monday morning news in some sort of version.
And I didn't read the whole, I just got the email, but it looks like he's very knowledgeable in.
He is exceedingly knowledgeable. I met with him last Thursday. He's exceedingly knowledgeable. He's set this, he's an IT person who works at Boston College, and he has set up portals at Boston College so that the students just have to look one place for all of their information. All of their information pours into that one place for them, no matter where it comes from. It was actually quite exciting talking to him about how to do it in Medfield. And part of what we started comparing to was how colleges now are giving all of their students email addresses that they will have for a lifetime, and that they can then point their emails to, and they can use that college email as where they get all of these diverse emails accumulated. He and I were thinking, well, gee, when someone moves to Medfield, maybe we assign them an email. And
No,
and he and I got very excited about that, unlike Chris.
no.
And then that could be the way that they could get all the information about the schools, about the issues that are going on in town, about, if the demented person in a particular street goes off missing, that street could get an email about, they could get notice of things. So it was just a very exciting, he's actually put together a similar sort of thing in Milford. And it had advertising in it. It produced money, like $20,000 or $25,000 a year for the schools in Milford. But it was, it's a very interesting concept.
You have to be careful. I think, was it Medway where they had one of the people that was involved in some sort of a system like that, got in all kinds of trouble. I think he ended up going to jail or something, didn't he?
I'm just thinking, I'm scrounging to get money to get the town's email system upgraded. I can't imagine giving email addresses to everybody in town.
Well, I didn't picture it was emails. I thought it was more like Bob Letman had, was kind of a voluntary thing, that news was put in there, and then if you wanted to join that, you used your own
There
thing.
are a lot of different ways of thinking
Yeah.
about it. You can have an opt-in system like that, or the town
I
could
think
hand
it's-
people emails when they arrive in town.
If you can distinguish between news and opinion, I don't think the town should get involved in opinion.
Yeah, you're right.
But there's a lot of
because-
facts that the town has. The town
Well,
has a ton of data
There are
that just
facts and
never
there are
gets out.
opinions, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
but there's a lot of data that the town has that just doesn't get given to the people. And that's like the Department of Transportation several years ago decided to make all of their data public. And within 2 months, the head of the DOT said that the people had started writing apps to tell everybody when the next bus was going to be at their bus stop, and when the next train was going to be arriving. And now that's just routine. When you ride the MBTA, you can have an app that'll tell you where all All the
DOT
trains
would be
and buses
better-
are.
Better served if they had the trains or buses arrive on time instead of writing apps about where they are.
The DOT didn't write the apps, it was the private industry that wrote the apps. They just made the data public, and then the capitalist system took over. But he just has some very interesting
It
ideas.
is, I haven't read it all, it just, the concept of, because we really have lost Patch, because when they fired all the editors.
It's no longer a news
Right,
system.
and I thought that, the two newspapers we have really don't have the Medfield editors to that. They both try to do a very good job, but I just think there's a gap that something maybe like this could fill, that it was a way to get information and news across. Like, we don't have coverage at our meetings, and Medfield TV does a great job by broadcasting. But there's, the Park and Recreation meetings and others, and they're not covered at all.
Yeah.
Planning Board or Conservation or other meetings that, we just don't have, that many towns have reporters there, and that information is going under the newspaper, and the people are keeping up to date with what's going on, and we're missing
Yeah,
some of
well,
that.
I think that's a dying thing. that
Well,
all the
or
newspapers were
online,
covering local
or
news
online, whatever it
that
is.
much.
Yeah.
Understand even the Globe cut way back on their local coverage. They fired a lot of people, and they're
Yeah.
reliant on bloggers, basically, for a lot of the local news. We know more about what goes on in Syria and the Ukraine than we know about what goes on in our own cities and towns,
Yeah,
fortunately, but.
okay, that's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I would just mention that I got to take a walk with the Medfield Youth Baseball, and this year I marched at the back of the parade, and that turned out to be a lot more fun, because you get to watch all the kids having fun and dealing with the crowds as they go along. I went over to the hearing on the Dover cell tower. This is the cell tower that's proposed in behind Evergreen Avenue, 93 feet tall, that we talked about at our last selectmen's meeting. The Dover Zoning Board of Appeals approached it, and I thought in just an excellent manner. Laverne Lovell from Lovell's actually is sitting on the ZBA over there, interestingly enough. The chair is an attorney from one of the downtown law firms, and did an excellent job of framing the issues and dealing with there were a lot of Medfield residents there. And there was a clear intent that I discerned from the ZBA in Dover to encourage the Dover-Sherburne school system to come forward and grab the cell tower. And they apparently, they were there in the form of the superintendent, and I think it was the vice chair of their school committee, who were saying that things had fallen between the cracks, but that they really did want to locate the cell tower on the school property, so that they were going to try to meet with the applicant. The applicant and their attorneys were saying, we're pretty far down the line on our planning and our spending, and we've got a petition, and we want to go forward with that, but they were being encouraged to consider the Dover-Sherburne school property. I presented the Medfield State Hospital water tower as an alternative. David Maxim was there as well, testifying, and he presented that as an alternative as well. It was wonderful when David announced his name. The chair of the ZBA acknowledged that they had seen his name in a letter where he had been suggested to them as a consultant, and that they were very happy, the chair said, to get his expertise for free now. But David made the point that there, afterwards to me, that there are temporary trucks that can come in and bring an antenna where we don't have the new water tower up yet, but that we will within the next year. Mike sent an email to explain to the chair of the ZBA, I think, that it would be up in a year's time or so. And I think under the zoning bylaw and the federal regulations, that if there's a reasonable alternative, that's a good reason for the ZBA to turn them down. So we've given them a good alternative.
So is that hearing continuing?
It's been continued. The dates for the continuance hasn't been set. It was continued to the 19th, but that turned out to be a date that had a problem in Dover for some reason. they're
So-
voting or something like
So it's
that.
also going to go to the planning board. Has that
Yeah.
also been put off until the ZBA makes a decision?
No, I believe that's the 12th, that's scheduled for, yeah.
That, the 12th is, that's still on?
Pete, I showed this to Richard earlier, that was in today's Wall Street Journal.
Oh, top
Supreme
court will
Court is-
weigh in on blocking cell towers. Interesting.
Yeah. So it is a very nationwide issue. If the Supreme Court is getting into it now, they've agreed to hear it, so.
It's like our 19th century railroads that run roughshod over the local
Yeah.
private property rights and
Well,
and
there was
government property rights of the local.
Just a decision, a couple of months ago, the Supreme Court came down and said that when the railroads abandoned the right-of-ways, the ownership reverted to the original owners of the property and not to the government. So a lot of trail lines now are going to be lost in different parts of the country because the ownership now they'll no longer be a right-of-way once the railroads abandon them, so.
And that's it for me. Anything on the informational list, Mike or Chris?
I just wanted to mention that Blanchard Warren passed away on Friday, I believe. He was a member of the Watchung Ward Society, I think, for the
Dwight
Dwight
Derby
Derby
House.
House, and had been very active at town meetings. In
I
fact,
spoke at
he's-
town meeting last week.
Yes, yeah, and he,
Lifelong resident of the town, graduate out of the high school, very active historically, historical society and others in the town.
yeah.
He will greatly be missed. A great, different sense of humor, but just a great individual that loved the town of Medfield.
Mm.
I don't know if Nancy had anything?
No, I don't have anything for the public here.
Okay.
I just have one
Private.
thing.
It's nice to see you sitting here, so I think.
We're thrilled to have an audience.
On the Tree City Award ceremony,
Oh, yeah.
they have suggested, 2 to 3, they would like no more than 2. So I just need to know who from the Board of Selectmen will attend the ceremony. They'll
What-
award the plaques.
And what's the date
I
again?
think it's June 4th, and it's 9 to 3. It's a full day
Andover.
in Andover, full day ceremony.
I would like to go. Can I get back to you on the June
Absolutely.
4th date? I don't know if you wanted to go, Mr. Chairman, or not, but.
I'll check my calendar. Anything else? Time to adjourn and have dinner.
This program was made possible through the generous support of your Medfield friends and neighbors, folks just like you. And thanks for watching.